So we're here tonight to have a brief presentation from Jim Barry from the state's Green Community Program to tell us a little bit more about the stretch code. On May 17th, next Tuesday at 7 p.m., there'll be an article on the town meeting warrant to allow town meeting members to vote on whether or not they wish to accept a bylaw, a general bylaw that would be adopting the state's stretch code. Tonight we also have Tom Quinlan, our building commissioner, with us, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Barry, who's going to jump right in for us.
Thank you, Heather. So as Heather mentioned, my name is Jim Barry. I am the regional coordinator for the Green Communities Division of the Department of Energy Resources. We are a relatively new division within the state government. We were created in 2008 by the Patrick administration by unanimous vote of the legislators. That's the bottom line here. Creation of the Green Communities Division within DOER happened in 2008. And what it did, among a lot of things, the Green Community Act set aside a certain sum of money, $10 million per year, that would only go to municipalities. So that would be cities and towns to do energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects, rather than spending money on residents or businesses. This particular program is only for municipalities, and so my job is to go from town to town and help explain the options that towns have with regards to grants if they become a green community, or different programs that we have available if they're not a green community. So this is a list of the things that we offer to all municipalities, but the one thing that gets me invited to a lot of places is the fact that we have up to $10 million a year that is not part of the state budget. It's funding that comes in from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auctions, so it's not subject to people saying, well, we shouldn't spend it on that, let's spend it on roads instead. It's a separate pool of money that is only for energy efficiency programs because the funding comes from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is tacked onto your electric bill. So anyone who pays an electric bill is basically paying money into this fund, and this fund is only to be used for energy efficient or renewable energy projects. There are 5 criterion that a town must participate in order to become a green community, and then once you become a green community, you're eligible to tap into those funds. But if you don't join the program, you don't have the money. So I'm going to go through all 5 relatively quickly with an emphasis on the 5th one, namely the stretch code. So the first one talks about being a little bit more business friendly for renewable energy businesses or renewable energy manufacturing, and it refers to when a new business comes into the state, and there's 351 different cities and towns, each with their own zoning. One of the first questions a new business asks is, where can I go and what's the zoning say? What's the permitting process? So we ask for at least one place in town that allows one of these kinds of activities without a special permit. And Southampton is working on that. Actually, I think they already have a location where research and development is allowed by right. Criteria 2 refers to this first criteria in that it says, whatever we're doing to meet criteria 1, let's make sure that we can give the developer an answer in an expedited format. And only someone in Boston would think that 12 months is expedited. So if you can get a letter from the town council that says there's nothing in your bylaws or your regulations that precludes giving an answer in 12 months, then you meet criteria 2. That's relatively simple. Criteria 3 of the 5 speaks to how the municipality uses energy in municipal buildings and vehicles and street and traffic lights. And it says, let's figure out how much energy we actually do consume. Let's add up all the heating oil we use, all the propane we use, all the electricity. Let's put it into a software tool that we provide you, get our arms around how much energy we actually do use, and then let's create a plan to reduce that amount by 20% over 5 years. You're not required to create a plan and fund it. You're not required to ask town meeting for money 5 years in advance, because you cannot. The idea is just create a reasonable plan that said, if we had the money, what are the sort of things we might do? For instance, more insulation in a police department, or a new boiler in a school, or better window shades in the town hall to reduce our energy consumption and thus reduce taxpayer money on the energy budget by 20%. Criteria 4 is similar to criteria 3, except it's specific to vehicles. It says, in the future, the town will purchase only fuel-efficient vehicles. We do not require a snowplow on a Prius. We do not require a snowplow on the Prius. In fact, the regulation says, purchase fuel-efficient vehicles whenever such vehicles are commercially available and practicable. So heavy-duty vehicles like fire trucks, ambulances, most DPW trucks are exempt from this. So most small towns are exempt from this whole criteria. If the selectmen were given free cars every year, then you would have to get fuel-efficient cars, but that's pretty unlikely. So criteria 5 of the 5 criteria says, because buildings consume so much energy in the whole country, and because one of our major goals is to reduce the amount of energy we use, thus reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce fossil fuels, reduce our reliance on offshore oil from people who don't necessarily like us, what we're going to do is try to encourage that new construction is as energy efficient as possible, thus reducing the need for energy into the future. So I'm going to talk tonight about what is a stretch code, who's involved in it, what it means for new homes, additions, renovations, and repairs. I'm going to compare the stretch code to your current code that you're using in town already. And we're going to talk about the possible new stretch code coming in January of 2017. And you can ask whatever questions you want, whenever you want. I'm easily interruptible. Start with some misconceptions about the stretch code. When it first came out in 2009, there was a lot of concern from the builder community, from the realtor community, from selectmen, from finance community people saying, what is this new stretch code? What is new and experimental? Well, that's a misconception. It is based on an existing program called Energy Star for Homes. So if you're familiar with Energy Star refrigerators or washers or dryers, there also is a program called Energy Star for Homes where the federal government encourages people to build energy efficient homes, and there are rebates and incentives for new homes that are built energy efficient. So it's not new and experimental, it's based on the same program that already exists. Another misconception is that it would require tight and unhealthy homes. Some of you may remember 30, 40 years ago when there was a real severe oil crisis, and we could only buy gasoline on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday if your license plate was odd, and Tuesday and Thursday if your license plate was even. In those days, people were really worried about saving oil, and one of the things they did is they put plastic under the sheetrock to keep the wind out and therefore make it really nice and tight. And it turns out that was a bad idea. It really was tight and unhealthy. It caused for mold and mildew. But you know, in the last 30 or 40 years, we've learned a lot about building science. We've learned a lot about building materials. We now have things like Tyvek and other substances that you can put on a home that does weather sealing, but not making it unhealthy. So it is no longer true, it was never true, that the stretch code requires tight, unhealthy homes. And it does not require foam insulation. Some builders think it's easier to build a stretch code home using foam insulation because it does both air sealing and insulation, but it's not required. You can build a home to the stretch code using the pink stuff if you wish. Another misconception was it required mechanical ventilation. That's not true. And people were concerned that if you have an oil heat, you can't meet the stretch code. That's because, as you may know, oil heat furnaces are not as efficient as gas heat furnaces. But you can still get a pretty good oil heat furnace, and you could meet the stretch code with it, although it is simpler to meet the stretch code with propane or natural gas if you have it. But it's not impossible. Another big concern was that town residents would be required to update their existing homes. You might be familiar with Title V for sewer systems, whereby if you sell your whole house, you have to upgrade it to meet the most recent thing. And people were concerned that if you met the stretch code and you sold your house, you'd have to upgrade your house to be energy efficient. That's not true. It's a misconception. Existing homes are not required to be retrofitted anytime in the future. The primary impact of the stretch code is on brand new residential construction. So what does it apply to? It applies to those parts of the residence that relate to energy, the insulation, doors, windows, skylights, lighting, appliances. Those are the things we're talking about, not the electrical code, not the fire code, not the structural code. And under the current stretch code, if you had an addition or a renovation, you're not required to bring the whole house up to stretch code. You only have to take care of the room addition to stretch code. And primarily, what that means is that you have Energy Star doors, windows, and skylights. That's about the primary difference between a stretch code addition and a non-stretch code addition. So criteria 5 talks about new buildings being more energy efficient, and the main key on this slide here is that a town is eligible to suggest multiple ways to become guaranteed to be energy efficient, but so far, since the building code is the only thing that guarantees how a house is built, so far the stretch code is the only way we know of to meet criteria 5. And the basic difference between the stretch code and the non-stretch code is that the stretch code requires performance testing rather than prescriptive measures. What the heck is he talking about? So prescriptive measures is you go to a doctor and you get a prescription and you follow the prescription and everything's fine. Similarly, most of the standard building code is prescriptive. You go to the building inspector, you get the book, and you just follow the book. R13 in the walls, R43 in the ceiling, you follow the prescription, everything's fine. With the stretch code, we're going to measure the performance of the whole house in total, not just prescriptive measures. And the reason you want to test performance is simply following the prescription might not necessarily mean it was done really well. So performance tests will help make sure that not only is the insulation done right in terms of the right R value, but we're going to perform testing on air sealing and insulation. So that's why you would want to have a test of performance. The process is we use a home energy rating services rating system. You see a thermometer on the right-hand side. The idea is if it's at 100, the thermometer is at 100, that's a typical house built to the 2006 code. And the idea is to make your new home be more energy efficient than that standard home. And every time we get a little bit better, the thermometer drops. And that's how we measure how efficient it is compared to standard home. So if someone says, I have a HER 65 home, that means it's 35% more efficient than the standard home built to 2006. The process is you start with a home energy rating services expert before you even go to the building official. Just like you would have an electrical subcontractor or a plumbing subcontractor, now you have to have a home energy rating services subcontractor that's going to work with you to design the house and to make sure that the house is done well. So you start with a computer model of the scheme of the house. You talk to this person, he's going to say, how big a house are we talking about? What direction does it face? What kind of windows are you going to use? What kind of insulation are you going to use? What kind of a heating system are you going to use? And the person is keying this information into the computer, and it is comparing it to the model house and making sure that the new house is more efficient and more energy efficient than the previous house. Once that design is done, then you get a building inspector, you get the permit, you go start working, and while the house is being built, this home energy rating services provider shows up and does air testing, does blaster testing, does blower door testing to make sure that the house is being built well. So that's the process. Commercial stretch code is also impacted by a stretch code. The short story is that in 2012 code that was adopted in your town in 2014, the commercial code that's in effect now is identical to the 2000 stretch code. So there's no impact on someone building new commercial buildings in your town, either to the stretch code or not to the stretch code. And the stretch code today is no longer much of a stretch. When it first came out, it was called a stretch code because we were asking people to just make a bit better, just stretch the procedures a little bit better, do a little bit better. That's why it was called a stretch code. But in 2014, the standard building code was upgraded. Every 3 or 4 years, the building codes change, and every year they get a little bit more energy efficient. And in 2014, the standard code that is used in your town caught up to the stretch code. And in some cases, it's even more stringent than the stretch code. The basic difference today for a new house built in Southampton versus new house built in Northampton is this home energy rating services expert that has to be involved. And in a stretch code town, that could cost between $750 and $1,250 for that expert to be involved. That person doesn't work for free, so you have to hire someone to help with that process. However, Mass Save has a new home program, and they provide up to $750 to pay for that extra cost. So although it's not much of a stretch, and although it is different, it does cost a little bit more, but that money is refunded in the form of rebate through the Mass Save. And some builders have told us that the stretch code is easier to build to than the standard code, particularly with regards to insulation in the attics. And as I mentioned before, the commercial code is basically identical in the base code as it is to the stretch code. So builders, realtors have found that the stretch code is no longer much of a stretch. It's not much of a problem. The HERS raters are easily found now. When it was first started, it was a question of where are we going to get these people? Are there going to be enough of these people? But this program's been involved for 6 years now, and more people have been hired, so that's no longer much of an issue. As you may know, Mass Save is already out there for you already, whether or not you're a green community. You can have them do a home energy audit in your own existing home. They'll help you with light bulbs, and there's lots of programs that the Mass Save program has. They also have one specifically for new construction, new homes. And there's builder incentives from $750 to $7,000 for family homes, depending on how far you drop that thermometer. We talked about the thermometer being lower and lower and lower by how energy efficient it is. You can get a substantial rebate by going really low. But in addition to, you get at least a $750 rebate for becoming a stretch code house. And there's appliance rebates, heating rebates, water heating rebates. These are available whether you're a stretch code or not. This is a comparison of some of the stretch code requirements versus the 2012 standard code that you're already doing. The HERS rater is required in the stretch code. It's optional in the standard code. Ceiling insulation provides in the HERS system, in the stretch code system, you have some trade-offs between how much insulation to do and where, whereas in the standard building code, you're supposed to use R49 everywhere, which is very difficult for some builders to comply with. In terms of windows, the window differences are almost identical. So the short story is, again, the stretch code is no longer much of a stretch today, although it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. People were concerned. People didn't want to do it first. But now towns are re-examining it, rethinking about it, and saying, well, you know what, maybe it's not such a bad deal. And as I mentioned before, the standard code changes over time. In 2017, there will be a new base code coming in. The base code is currently about the same as the stretch code, and in 2017, it'll be more stringent than the current stretch code. So there is a proposal to have a new stretch code come out, but it says that for new homes, you simply follow the performance path, not the prescriptive path. So that's the one that requires the home energy rating services person to be involved. And it says explicitly that additions, renovations, and repairs are not impacted by the stretch code. So any concern about someone saying, well, it's going to put an addition on my house, what is it going to cost me extra? The answer is it's not going to cost you anything extra. You don't need that extra expert. You don't need to do anything special with windows or heating system. You follow the standard building code as of 2017, whether you're in a stretch code or not, when you're doing the additions. And in terms of commercial stretch code, only large buildings over 100,000 square feet are impacted by the stretch code. So small commercial buildings or additions or renovations to existing commercial buildings have no impact on the stretch code. People always say, yeah, but it's going to cost something, so what's it going to cost? So we bring forth some numbers. One of the first things that Governor Baker said is there will be no new regulations without a cost-benefit analysis being done. So there's been some cost analysis done. So this is going to be a two-sheet piece of paper I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you sheet one first. This is a summary page. This is an all-electric home built in Worcester, 2,200 square feet. And the estimated cost of adjustments over there in this column is $2,066. There's some utility rebates, and so we're going to go through the second page is the details of how I got this page. So let's go to the second page. I'm not sure if I have a I thought I had a, there we go. So I have a little red dot on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see it at home. So this is the base requirements of the new building code in 2017. And the ones that are highlighted in blue are the things that were done to meet the stretch code. And over here is the cost of these blue things. So we're going to take the floors and windows, floor and walls insulation, and we're going to go from grade 1 to grade 2 because it's a little bit easier to do a grade 2. So it's costing us less money to do this system. I guess the first thing I should say is this is the column of extra costs because it's the stretch code. And in Worcester, for this size home, the person to be the expert is going to be about $1,350. We're going to save a little bit of money on insulation and on the ceiling. We're going to save a lot of money, we're going to pay more money to get a better heat pump system. This is an additional $500 cost, an additional $400 heat pump for domestic hot water. So these are the existing systems we have here. This is the improved system. So the total extra cost to build the stretch code is $2,000 to build this house. However, the Mass Save program offers a $1,200 rebate. The heat pump comes with a $2,500 rebate. The heat pump hot water heater has a $750 rebate. They're going to give you free LED light bulbs, which are worth about $200. So the total savings or rebates is about $4,700. It costs you $2,000 to build it, so you have a net gain of, where am I going? I'm going backwards. I got the, the builder is actually going to save $2,727 to build to stretch code because of all the added incentives for the heat pumps, the light bulbs, and the payment for the person who's doing the work. So, yes, the stretch code is a little bit different. Yes, it requires better equipment. Yes, it requires an expert to be involved in the process, but the total cost to the builder is a net gain to the builder. This is a similar sized house, but this one's going to use natural gas heat rather than electric heat. This one has a little bit difference in cost. We still have the home energy rating services expert has to be involved. We're still going to get a better furnace, slightly better furnace. It's going to cost us more money. So the whole extra cost to build a stretch code house with natural gas is again about $2,000. The incentives are a little bit less because you're not getting quite the substantial difference in the heating system, but the incentives are $2,050 and the cost is $2,017. So again, the builder is saving money by building to the stretch code standards than the non-stretch code standards. When we first started, we weren't sure how many towns would actually do this. Many towns looked at it and said, well, you know what, we're not exactly sure, we're not going to say yes yet. And so, however, as of November, there's been 161 municipalities have said yes. Many of them 5 years ago, and there's been 5 building seasons since then. Builders have not gone out of business. Realtors have not gone out of business. Builders have not built homes in non-stretch code communities instead of stretch code communities. In fact, many realtors like selling stretch code homes because they can brag about this is an energy saving house. So these are the towns that have done stretch code, and many of them have gone on to meet the other 4 criteria and have found ways to get into our money. So these are all the 155 communities that are green communities. This is a map of just the local area, so we're here in Southampton. Westfield is seriously considering becoming a green community next October. Warren and Ware said yes to stretch code just this past week. New Braintree and West Brookfield are voting on it. Hawley said yes Monday night. Who else did it recently? Beckett. Beckett said yes, I think it was a week ago Monday. So more and more towns are revisiting this issue for a couple reasons. One of which is they want the money, and 2, they've realized that it's not so much of a problem anymore like it had been. Why do towns do it? Like I say, most towns do it for the money. If you become a green community, everyone gets at least $125,000 to start. Southampton is set up to be likely to receive about $140,000. So that would come to you next, so you would apply in October, then you would tell us what you want to spend the money on. You'd ask to spend money on things like energy efficiency projects in town buildings, like insulation or heating systems. And then you start spending the money to save taxpayer money. We have given away almost $41 million already in the last 5 years. $50 million have been awarded. We've actually given out 41 of it. Some are slower than others to get the money. We award them, but you've got to spend it to get it. No, that's not true. We give you the advance on the money, but some small towns can't spend all their money right away because they don't have procurement officers. They don't have, so it takes a little bit of time. They do one project at a time. That's my contact information. If anyone has any questions or concerns, they can send me an email at jim.berry@state.ma.us or call me at phone number there, 413-755-2232. I have an office in Springfield. I live in Belchertown. I'm available to answer questions on this or any other issues about the green communities. And if there's any questions from people, I'm happy to take them now. No? Well, then I thank you for your attention, and I think we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.